Chapter 12, Prompting and Fading. Can you give me a hint? Show us someone who watches a dog with advanced training and says, "My dog could never do that," and we'll show you someone who doesn't understand prompting and fading. Prompting and fading are the behavioral version of what's happening behind the scenes in a magic act. No, Virginia, the young woman in the magic act, doesn't really levitate off the table. She is on the very well-disguised arm of a forklift. The well-trained dog has had the benefit of hours of good training. That training was partly made up of prompts and fading that, like the forklift, could not be seen in the final presentation. A time and place for everything. Once you have used shaping to teach new behaviors and differential reinforcement to increase those behaviors, you need a way to ensure the behaviors will occur at the right time and place. That's where prompting and fading come in. They are used to get target behaviors to occur reliably in the appropriate settings and situations. Prompts increase the likelihood that the dog or person will engage in the correct behavior at the right time and place. We think of them as hints or extra help in showing the dog what you expect. Prompting means providing antecedents that result in the occurrence of a target behavior. Response prompts. One category of prompts is offered directly by your behavior. In other words, something you do acts as a prompt. These are called response prompts. Examples include verbal prompts, as when you stand by the broad jump and say to the dog, "Over." Gestural prompts, as when you wave your hand over the jump or point to the jump. Physical prompts, as when you hold the leash or collar and guide the dog over the jump. Modeling prompts, as when you go over the jump first, with the dog following behind on a leash. Modeling is used much less with dogs than in human training settings. Most trainers would not teach jumping by going over a jump themselves, although some do. Environmental prompts. Prompts can also be related to stimuli. These kinds of prompts are called environmental or stimulus prompts. An environmental prompt involves adding or removing a stimulus to increase the likelihood of getting the correct response. For example, in the exciting dog sport called flyball, dogs are required to run, jump over a series of low jumps, press a lever on a box that tosses a ball, catch the ball, and return to their handler over the jumps. The sport is run as a relay race, with 2 teams and 2 sets of equipment placed side by side. Dogs love flyball, and they move at lightning speeds and furry blurs as the crowd screams and cheers. Some dogs that are learning flyball have problems when they are first sent to go over the jumps without their handler. They take a few steps, run around the jumps, or wander off the course to see other dogs or smell something in the training area. To prevent this, some flyball trainers construct a chute out of boards standing on their sides to guide the dog from the handler to their first jump. The chute is an environmental prompt that increases the likelihood that dog will go over the first jump. Fading, weaning off the special help. With this flyball example, entry chutes work well for beginning dogs, but the dog must eventually be able to work without special prompts. Trainers who use the chutes to teach flyball gradually move the boards wider and wider apart, or they gradually add open spaces in the chute until the boards are completely removed. This procedure is an example of fading. You can use fading in several ways. Fading verbal prompts from louder commands to whispers, fading environmental prompts such as special training equipment or modifications, fading physical prompts such as initially using a leash to guide the dog and eventually removing the leash, and last, fading one prompt when 2 are used during training, such as starting with hand signals and verbal commands and fading to hand signals only. Fading means gradually reducing the strength of a prompt. Things to remember about fading. Number 1, before using fading, you must decide what you want the dog's final behavior to be. You should identify the prompts to be faded and have a plan for fading them. Number 3, cues should be faded so gradually that mistakes are avoided and the dog has what we call errorless learning. Number 4, if the dog does make a mistake, move back to the previous level and bring back the more intense level of prompts. Transfer of stimulus control. Fading prompts is how you transfer stimulus control. This means that stimulus control is transferred from the environmental stimuli, such as verbal and physical help or special training equipment, to the natural final stimulus related to the desired behavior. Examples of fading in formal obedience training. Lie down. Start with leash on and dog in sit position. Facing dog, stay down and with a large forward motion of the arm, push down on the leash until dog is in the down position. Repeat, gradually fading the verbal and physical prompt and stepping back until the dog responds to the hand signal only. Heel. Leash is faded from novice to off-leash work in open and utility classes. A short, very light cord may be used as a transition from leash to no leash. Figure 8. Same as with heel. Stand for judge's exam. Begin with the dog in sit position. Hand signal to stand is paired with verbal command stand. In the beginning, the handler uses a physical prompt. The handler holds the dog's collar to guide the dog from sit to stand, and a hand under the belly holds the dog in the stand if needed. Physical prompts are gradually faded. Recall. Dog called to handler. Dog is taught to come from a short distance on a leash. Slight tug on the leash is paired with verbal command come. The leash is faded. Directed jumping. Dog signaled by handler to go over one of two jumps. Initially, the handler stands right at the jump the dog is to go over. Handler gradually moves away, fades presence at jump, and the dog is signaled from a distance. How does this work? A good example is the sit front exercise in obedience competition. In this exercise, when the dog is called to come, it must return to the handler and sit down straight in front, looking up at the handler. Many trainers use wooden dowels to guide the dog into the correct front and center position. Physical prompts. The dowels can eventually be shortened, then removed, and the handler can cue the dog with two index fingers pointing downward to indicate front. Finally, unless the handler wishes to be disqualified from formal obedience competition, pointing with the fingers must be faded and the hands must hang naturally at the handler's sides. Stimulus control has been transferred from the dowels to the handler's pointing fingers to the final stimulus of the handler standing in a natural position. All this has been achieved using prompts and fading. It's how old dogs learn new tricks. Special training aids are faded. Physical guidance of the dog is faded to verbal instructions, and the trainer holds off on hinting and helping for longer periods of time. The last word on prompting and fading. Because humans are verbal, school teachers often begin with the lowest level of prompts. They start with verbal prompts and increase to physical prompts only if the verbal ones are ineffective. Dogs are not verbal, and in dog training, many trainers often begin teaching a new skill with physical prompts, such as guiding the dog with a leash. Some trainers advocate a hands-off approach to training and believe that all behaviors can be shaped with no physical prompts. But, in general, providing some level of physical prompt is a much faster way to teach new skills. Most of the top-rated trainers in all areas of canine competition are highly skilled at using prompts and fading. Prompting, fading, and transferring stimulus control are the procedures that will develop a dog with behavior you can count on. You transfer stimulus control by decreasing the level of prompts from most to least, decreasing physical guidance, and delaying the time for presenting prompts.